and I'm sort of working on a more, it's almost like LITE, right? I'm sort of more of a light developer. You guys have always accused me of that. I'll own it.
And I wouldn't say that.
It's not an accusation.
But you know, it's just because my approach has been different for a long time. It's still different,
Right.
And so like I said, it's a great party. It's so nice to have you guys join me. You know, it was lonely for a long time.
It was funny.
You were the pioneer.
Well,
Yeah.
hardly. I mean, that's the thing. I was doing what everyone else did.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, the whole world has been out there doing this
Yeah.
stuff, and you guys, not necessarily you guys at this table, but the SharePoint community and sort of the people who've been .NET developers have these blinders on for a long time.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's something you've seen when I first started working with SharePoint 2013. You could see where Microsoft was really trying to push the product to be more web dev, more client side kind of stuff. You really saw that so many people were like, "What? This is all JavaScript stuff. It's all crap. You can't do the right stuff." And you saw like sessions that Scott Hilliard did at the SharePoint conference earlier this year. He didn't do anything that was SharePoint related. It was just like we call it enterprise style JavaScript, right? Where you've got to deal with versioning. You try and deal with doing good module type development, and not sticking everything in the global scope. But the whole concept of global scope, you start explaining to some people that here's what it is, and here's if you create this thing called an IFE, an IIFE, and put your variables in there. You show them, hey, look, here's the code that does that, and they're like, yeah, what does that really do for me? And you explain it, and they're like, oh crap, that's kind of important. It's funny you say that we're learning from you, but I think there's a lot of stuff that we have all brought to the table that we bring in. We try and push it into that client side space. Yeah. It doesn't work at all, and it's a very bad idea. Well, it works, but it's a very bad idea in the client side space. So we are learning a lot from it as well, and it's nice to really see that. I don't know how much that happens outside of the space that we traditionally run in, but I can see how much there's a lot of help going back and forth between the two disciplines, from your background to, I know from my background and other people's backgrounds.
Well, I think just quickly, I think in most other technology areas, sort of break out of our circle, this stuff goes on all the time, right? I mean, the cross-pollination thing at a small startup is endless. It's just constant. We've all been in this sort of rut, right? We try not to pay attention to what's going on out in the world because it's too much.
Right.
We've got a big space in there now. So I think it's great that some of the stuff that you and Scott have done, bringing some patterns to enterprise class to JavaScript. It's changed the way I build stuff. So as we're bringing skill sets from other disciplines together, that's where really interesting innovation happens.
Yeah, it's funny you say that too. It's like, because I think that we've always complained that the pace of technology is changing so quick. You run into those devs that complain about the fact that it's going so fast. Now it seems to me like it's just flying at a pace. And you subscribe to there's an email that I get every week from GitHub about the most popular projects. I pop in there, look at a couple of them, and it's like, I think by the time I see them, they've got 400 stars on it. It's like, are you freaking? This thing is awesome, but no one's talking about it. And all of a sudden, it comes out and it gets another 5,000 stars. So yeah, Mikhail, you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I think Mark really touched on it because he's doing service-oriented programming. I mean, he's using a service, pulling data back.
That's true. Yeah.
I mean, I've had my head in Visual Studio for so long and used to the way of developing. And now you you have to fire up an API call, using REST typically now, get the data back. And now you move everything from your code and then over to JavaScript. And how do you do the asynchronous programming in JavaScript? That took me a long time to wrap my head around, using jQuery for promises, just make that work. And then authentication is hard, because usually you run in, everyone's already authenticated, you don't have to think about it, you're running in the context of the user, and now you suddenly have to, there's OAuth, and how should you do your tokens and refresh tokens. There's a whole different way of programming.
It really is. Doug, do you have something to add to this too?
Yeah, I mean, my perspective is a lot different because I was building distributed systems back in COM and Corba, what we called Windows DNA, and all of these things. And when the internet became really ubiquitous, it made a lot of those design patterns unworkable because it was slow. But it's not slow anymore, and so a lot of techniques that were state of the art or in the late 90s or the early 2000s that fell off simply because of limitations of the technology are now back fully in play. And so I'm using you talk about asynchronous and thinking about systems as cloud systems, I'm actually using knowledge that I gained working at a company where we were doing internet banking, and if you went to the bank site, you were hitting a data center in California, which was running AIX, which was making a almost SOAP call, because we had all these almost standard technologies that we invented ourselves over our data center, which was then pulling some data out of SQL Server. Some cases it would hit a SDLC network over to a data center in Cincinnati, and it would pull it all together, and it would appear in the browser.
Yeah.
Now we had to do all that rendering on the server side because we couldn't, but we had point-to-point connections between all of these data centers, and when we went into ASP.NET, all of that distributed thinking collapsed. And I think that you're wrong about the SharePoint developers. It's all of the server-side developers everywhere, whether it's PHP or Ruby on Rails or struts or whatever they use in Java. We were using server-side rendering technologies to overcome network limitations that don't exist anymore.
It's almost going back to client server, where client is web instead of client being like dumb terminal, right?
Well, right. The average broadband connectivity speed, now there's still the speed of light and distance factors, but the average broadband connection is faster than the typical local area network when Windows 95 came out.
Jesus, I didn't realize that. It's a cool stat.
Yeah,
So,
this is I think a lot of people, the older we get, we have some gray hair sitting around the table. The older we get, the more we realize that these are not like groundbreaking changes. They're evolutions of patterns, right? So we had client server back in the, when was that? Late 80s, early 90s. I mean, I know I was there. And we're seeing this. We see this sort of slow pendulum going back and forth between centralized processing and distributed processing. The technology's changed because some of the underlying capabilities change. I mean, I'm totally agreeing with you.
Yeah.
And what I think people don't realize is that this pace of change that we see, while it's faster now, it's not new. I mean, we're always looking at new technologies. We ought to always be looking, we ought to always have our blinders folded back behind our heads so that we can look out and see, well, who's doing the best stuff in web development, cloud development, whatever, and borrow from those things, as opposed to, what's the most, well-known SharePoint development. We ought to be looking outside.
That's a good point, Mark. Bjorn?
Yeah, I said I didn't have any JavaScript background. That's not completely true because I worked with it in the 90s.
Oh yeah,
in '96 when Netscape came, and I should have kept it that way because it disappeared for some time, and now it's emerged again with the client development. So I deeply regret that I couldn't keep the knowledge that I had that time.
It's very similar to my experience, where I found that when I started to teach the SharePoint stuff, you talk a little bit about JavaScript to people, and it's like, how many of you consider yourself strong JavaScript developers? And like 5 or 6 people raise their hand. I'm like, okay, now how many of you are like me, which is I'm a JavaScript developer, but I've really just been stealing stuff off of ESPN.com, how to do drop-down lists for the last 10 years. It looked really cool, and then how do I put that in my site, right? Of course, it's always in the global scope, and then it breaks, and you're like, why the hell is it breaking? So, Fabian,
No, I think it hits home right here, because for me, I'm one of the last adopters. I held out, trying to do client-side stuff until I had no other choice. So now my biggest decision points are, what do I learn first? I'm pinging John Pop on Twitter, hey, you need to help me with learning Angular. Then I go to GitHub and I really rob stuff from there and just try to work it on my own. The benefit though is that I can quickly spin up sites in Azure. I can test stuff out. I can kill it. I can come back. The speed of the pace of which you can learn now is just so fast.
Yeah.
You almost have no time. To decide which lane you want to be in.
You have to. I've had to apply the concepts that I've done, the learning, I guess, I've done with SharePoint, which is doing SharePoint for 10 years. But there are many places where SharePoint, I don't have a clue what I'm doing there. Like around the BI stack, no clue. I didn't learn what Power BI was until just a few months ago. You can't know it all. Yep. You have to pick and choose and focus. And you can be an academic and learn all of it, but we all got to also pay bills. So you focus on what's going to be good for your project. So we've had a great discussion here. I want to go too long here, but I do want to pop something on you guys at the very end. CJ and I have started to do something kind of new. This will be fun to see what comes off the top of your head. I intentionally did not tell you about this ahead of time. But CJ and I have started doing something we call our picks. And so we basically said, let me pick a link or maybe pick something that I think is cool. What's interesting to me right now? What am I doing? What's a fun thing? It doesn't have to be technology related. I'll throw my first one out. Mine's GoPro. right? Because we just got these. For those of you who can't see, we're using a GoPro to do this, and hopefully we can have a cool video. It'll be on YouTube sometime soon from this episode. But yeah, they gave us GoPros at the MVP summit. So yeah, that was way cool. Kind of a nice step up from the USB keys and the flashlights. But anyway, so give me just a pick. What is something that's cool to you? It could be a JavaScript library. It could be some other library that's cool. Some tool that you're using. Some cool book that you're reading or something like that. Just throw it out there. I'm going to try and go around to everybody and try and do this in about 1 minute, really quick. Fabian,
Xamarin. It's all about Xamarin. It's all about cross-platform mobile development where you can target iOS, Android, and Windows. Cross-platform libraries, shared libraries. That's all it is.
Cool. Xamarin, there's one. Bjorn?
Xamarin for me too, because
Xamarin.
I'm on Android, but I have an iPhone and I have a Windows phone, so now I'm getting to that too.
Very cool. Very cool. Mark, you got one?
I'm having a ball writing things like single-page applications. That means a lot of different things, but just sort of playing in that space is just a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Writing some fun code.
Doug?
Identity.
Identity.
I'm very excited now that we're coming up on Windows 10 and seeing what's happening with Azure Active Directory. I think that that's the last major drag to break down the walls between to make everything cloudy, right? At that point, when we can deal with identity and have it be fully cloud and have it be easy, then everybody will build apps the same way, whether they're in their data center or they're in their cloud.
Yep.
Because they will not, the impedance. That's a new word I just made. The impedance is going to be gone.
We won't bleep that one out.
All right.
So it's funny you say that too, because what did you see last week or 2 weeks ago? Amazon Web Services released an identity product that is true Active Directory. That's like join computers in the cloud and all that kind of stuff, more than what Azure can do. I love seeing that because I love what the Azure guys are doing, but now there's like some hardcore competition going that people got to innovate on each other now.
Yeah, and it's going to be great because that stuff's icky and nasty to do underneath the covers, and I think it's a place where a lot of people quit right off the bat.
It's complicated. It's confusing,
complicated.
It's heady. There's not much you can put your fingers on, and it's hard to draw the whole thing out.
Because there's no picture. It all happens invisibly under the wire.
Exactly right. These stupid tokens.
Yeah.
Miguel.
Yeah. So all jet lagged. I'll thing on the Xamarin thing. So I haven't touched it yet.
Yeah.
But I'm reading blogs about it. I met this other MVP yesterday. So I'm following his blog. He blogs about Xamarin. It seems really cool because I want to use my C# knowledge when I do stuff.
Very cool. Guys, thank you very much for taking the time out this morning to do this. Hopefully, make sure we all grab a good coffee to kind of stay awake for the first few sessions. But be a good summit, and thanks again for taking the time to do this.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Much.
Great. That's Miguel D. Casa. He's
So-
he's here.
Andrew, what do you think about the
What's this?
Miguel D.
Angular
Casa
2.0
created Xamarin with
announcement?
Freeman.
I love the direction they're going. I love the direction they're going. They have